All right, let's jump right in. We're going to tackle a passage that's, well, it's one of the most sobering in the whole Bible, but it's also one of the most spiritually clarifying. We're talking about Romans chapter 1. And to really get our heads around this chapter, you've got to see it like this. Think of Romans 1 as this deep, dark backdrop, like a piece of black velvet. Why? Because that's what makes the gospel, the good news, shine like a diamond with this just ferocious brilliance. It's all about the contrast. Okay, so the chapter kicks off with a pretty heavy topic, the wrath of God. And right away, we've got to be super clear about what this actually means. Because, let's be honest, it's probably not what you're imagining.
Yeah, this isn't God just, flying off the handle. The wrath of God described here is his steady, holy, and get this, morally necessary opposition to anything and everything that messes up and destroys his good creation. It's the only possible response that perfect goodness can have when it comes face to face with evil.
I mean, just think about it for a second. A God who just shrugs at injustice? Who's indifferent to cruelty? To seeing his world fall apart? Would you call that a good God? No way. So you see, God's opposition to sin isn't separate from his love. It flows right out of his perfect goodness. All right, so that begs a question, right? Where does all this brokenness even come from? Well, the Bible's diagnosis goes way deeper than just our actions or behaviors. It points to something much more fundamental, something going on deep inside each of us.
We see the symptoms everywhere, don't we? The moral chaos, people just breaking all the rules, but that's just the surface. The real root cause? It's a breakdown in worship. See, this isn't really about a list of rules we're breaking. It's about a love that's pointed in the wrong direction. It's about what we really value, what we truly treasure.
And Romans chapter 1, verse 23 just nails it. It describes this foundational exchange. You could call it the great trade down that's at the very heart of the human problem. We take the infinite, unending glory of God himself, and we trade it for created things that just don't last. Theologians have called the human heart an idol factory, and that's exactly what this passage is getting at. It's just constantly churning out things to put in God's place, things to worship. And listen, every single moral problem we see out there, and if we're honest, in our own lives too, grows from this one single root, worshiping the wrong things. And this misdirected worship, it leads to a form of judgment that is frankly chilling. It's this unique, terrifying idea that gets hammered home in this chapter with one single phrase repeated over and over.
Yeah, you'll see it not just once, not twice, but 3 times. The text deliberately repeats this phrase, and it creates this rhythm, this drumbeat of judgment that is just deeply unsettling.
So here it is the first time, in verse 24. Therefore God gave them over. Wow. Such a simple phrase, but the weight of it is just devastating. Just let that sink in for a moment. God gave them over. And then it comes again just 2 verses later in verse 26. For this reason, God gave them over. See, the pattern is so intentional. This is a direct, solemn consequence of that great exchange we talked about.
And then, the third and final time, in verse 28, he gave them over to a debased mind. There's this sense of finality to it. Now, this is judgment, but it's probably not what comes to mind when you hear that word.
So what on earth does that mean, God gave them over? Well, it's not about lightning bolts from the sky. It's more like God saying, all right, you're so insistent on rejecting me, you are determined to go down this path? Fine, I'll let you have what you want. The punishment, you see, is getting the freedom to sprint headfirst into the very ruin that we've chosen. It's a judgment of abandonment. Okay, now as we're hearing all this, it is so easy to start pointing fingers, right? To think about those people out there. But hold on, because the Apostle Paul is about to pull a massive plot twist. This diagnosis, it's about to be aimed at someone you might not expect at all. So that really is the million-dollar question, isn't it? Who is this incredibly bleak picture of humanity really for? And I'm telling you, the answer is designed to catch every single one of us completely by surprise. What's happening here is just brilliant. Paul is setting a trap, a rhetorical trap, and it's for anyone and everyone who's been reading along, nodding their head, thinking, yep, he's totally right about them, those wicked people. And just when you're comfortable, bam, the trap springs. The very next verse, the first verse of chapter 2 says, therefore you have no excuse. Whoa, suddenly the camera just flips around. The finger isn't pointing out there anymore. It's pointing right back at us.
The diagnosis of Romans 1 isn't a weapon to use on others, it's a mirror for every single one of us to look into.
Okay, so why? Why go into all this detail? Why paint such an incredibly dark picture of humanity? Well, this is where it all comes together. This is how this grim reality connects to the absolutely glorious news of the gospel.
Let's be real clear. Jesus didn't show up for pretty good people who just needed a few tips to be better. No! The sheer darkness of the diagnosis in Romans 1 is exactly what shows us why we didn't just need a life coach or a good teacher. We were in desperate need of a savior.
So who did he come for? He came for the people described in this chapter. He came for the God rejectors, the truth suppressors, the idol makers, the glory exchangers. He came for the people whose lives are collapsing morally, for the spiritual runaways. He came for Romans 1 people. And what does that mean? It means he came for us.
And that is the magnificent point of it all. The purpose of this chapter isn't to crush us with despair. It's to show us the unbelievable cost of our rescue, the depth of the pit that Jesus Christ willingly climbed into for us. That's what reveals the absolutely immeasurable heights of the glory he brings us into. And my friends, that is the good news.